Hope the internet pipes work. It says that we're live on Why We Roll, the tabletop RPG design podcast from the Stillfleet Studio, hosted by Christopher Pickett.
Hey, that's me.
And Wythe Marschall, that's me. And we are here with our guest, Logan Dean, with whom we've had the pleasure of working and a little bit of hanging out, playing some games. We're going to talk about games real quick before we get into it. If you like what you hear, and in general, if you like our games and such, you can head over to patreon.com/stillfleet. And or you can just subscribe to the show, maybe write a little review and say, I liked what they said about games. If you're a game designer or some sort of adjacent interesting person, just email us. We like guests. So it's co@stillfleet.com or find us on social media @stillfleet. And with that, what's up, Logan?
There's a lot of directives that you give your audience. You're like, do this, no, and then go doing this.
Look,
I normally don't say anything.
Go do this.
Yeah,
we have a lot of asks. Okay.
Yeah,
I like how you're like your audience's DM.
Yeah,
Slide to the left.
We're very used to DMing, so.
No, nothing is up. Today's January 27th, 2025.
We're a few days in.
Closest thing I have to holding up today's newspaper.
We're a few days into the new regime. So far, still making games.
Yeah, so far.
I guess usually we start with who are you? What do you do?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
You could also take a stab at that, but you know more about
not about this. You're the Johnny Carson type. I am Logan. I make games for people professionally. I made a game called The Company Corporate Survival Horror in 2020. And then I started working in product development for traditional board games, mass market board games over at Cyanide and Happiness. And now I kind of take that corporate game fire and give it to independent artists, kind of share it around so that everybody knows how to make games for cheap and not lose their shirts.
That is a wild concept.
Which part?
Yeah, that's very cool.
Just us not losing our shirts.
Yeah, I mean, people lose money on games all the time.
Turns out.
It's a money-losing industry. It's a lot like restaurants, I always think. Well, that's cool. You've made some cool games. I have not played all of them because I think you've worked on a lot of games, but we have actually already talked about your horror game with Adam Voss on the show, and we can talk about it more. And you also make games as Megacorp.
I do publish as Megacorp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So The Company, which is very adjacent to things Chris and I and our friends like. So sort of dystopian, sci-fi, horror-themed games. And you might be working on some new games. So I'm hoping today we can just kind of really see where our conversation takes us, but at least hit on some of the highlights, some of the weird stuff, psychers, sci-fi themes that we know and love and that you are good at bringing to the fore in game land. Before we do that, though, Logan, how did you get into games? How did you first get involved?
So I have two secret origin stories. The first one is in the year 2000. I bought the Star Wars Invasion of Thebes box set from B. Dalton Books. And that was the Wizards of the Coast Star Wars D20 introductory box. And I mostly bought it because it had a free action figure in it. But I thought it was a board game. And so I went to hang out at my friend's house, and then we made characters and we're we don't know what to do next. And so that made me a dungeon master forever. And then in, let's say 2010, I got Arkham Horror 2nd Edition from Fantasy Flight Games. And that kind of opened that big box of what board games are now, which is this big industry of innovation and creativity and just capitalism run amok. But that was my intro into that Euro game type style thing. And then it was just downhill from there. Oh, and then I started playing Magic in the 6th grade.
Oh man, yeah, the hooks that get a lot of us for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is interesting to think about Arkham Horror in terms of board games because it's a board game and not at the same time, right? And so like it does have this kind of expanding definition of what we can consider a board game in terms of production.
It is a light role-playing game.
Yeah.
All based like card prompts, but like with the board and dice and everything. But yeah, no, it was definitely a bridge back into RP. When I was a kid, I used to play a lot of Hero Quest.
Oh yeah.
So like that was but not correctly, because like the Hero Quest set I got was from a yard sale when I was probably like 11, and it was not complete, including having no rules. So we would just set it up and like fuck around. Turns out you can make a living doing that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fewer the rules, the better for selling games. More miniatures, fewer rules. No, that is like
a credo. Like what?
More miniatures.
Similar path to a lot of us, right? So some sort of D&D-esque experience, some sort of nouveau, complicated, not legacy board game, and Magic.
Magic's always
and Magic. Yeah.
But I mean, like D&D-esque was it, like in the late 90s.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you were like a goth, which is shade towards goths, but like I wasn't into Vampire the Masquerade in 1998. I wasn't like trying to read Mage the Ascension, but I was into fucking Dark Sun. That shit was cool.
I was at a regional con recently, and they were launching a living campaign for Dark Sun.
Oh
God! Like a Discord server, and you can join games and time passes, and you're all part of this world. And I was like, this feels such of that era. Like this is like, I don't know how much that's nostalgia for another time for other reasons, or is it just like, oh yeah, Dark Sun is totally slept on.
It's not.
No, I was real. It's not. Yeah, no, people know
it's
about
really not. Like we shouldn't ever bring it back. I think some of the concepts are cool, but they're too close to home. Like wizards ruined the environment. It's like, yeah, that happened.
Yeah,
like
yeah, it's cli-fi. That's one reason I like it. Yeah,
it hews very closely to the original inspiration for a lot of D&D stuff, which is just Jack Vance, right? Like the Dying Earth genre,
right? The Dying Earth
general,
for sure. And it's got a lot of like Ballardian type of influences. Like you got a lot of like Drowned World in there, and what is society after everything falls apart? And in the 90s, like everybody was just like had like all boned up for society falling apart. Turns out, not great.
Yeah, the lived experience is not as fun as we thought it was going to be.
I think they think it's not falling apart. I think that's been the big shock for people who voted for Kamala or whatever was like, we didn't win. We thought that would, we were like, things would just be fine as long as, Trump didn't win. And it's like, well, it's not going to be fine either way, basically.
I was talking to my partner about this, like, I think today, where I was like, they ran on a platform of, we're not going to change a thing.
Yeah. Right.
And like, nobody bought it. It's like, nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. It is terrible. Falling apart, so we have to at least change something. Yeah.
Something's got to give, and it shouldn't be the infrastructure.
Right. Yeah.
Oh man.
So with that, so you started making games at some point. What was? How'd you do that? How'd you start making?
Labor Day, 2019. I wrote What a Terrible Night, which is like a pamphlet game. And it's just about drawing cards and getting out of a house, like a haunted house. And then that just kind of like, but I was working on the company at that point. Because the company started as a mothership module.
Oh, gotcha.
And then I play tested it at Gen Con like 2019 and wanted to do a different thing. Because it was a modern, like it was set like contemporarily. And I didn't want to like do corporate space horror. I do always want to do corporate space horror but it's just life. So I took that out. I just was like, okay, what if you were somebody just trying to do a job? And what does that look like now? I was also really mad at my job at the time, so like I worked on it there. But the company is like the thing that kind of like broke my brain open. I learned how to do layout. I learned how to do editing poorly. I wrote the whole thing, play tested it. It was a book that I wrote, and it is finished.
Nice. And is something you've gone back to, right? So this was your like original game, and also sort of has become a game you've extended and are looking. Is that true? I mean, I feel like you're working on the company still.
I mean, like the company became the actual the company, the titular company, Wuhan Baxter, WB, became my identity. Like it became my, I guess, kind of almost like a pseudonym. Like this piece, it is the Megacorp, right? In Megacorp games is WB. And so it's in everything I write, either, Wuhan Baxter or Baxter, which was the company like 200 years ago. Because I got a book over here somewhere that's got like 200 years of this fictional company history. And I just kept putting it in stuff. And yeah, now it's in like Triangle Agency, and like it's in Liminal Horror. Like I just started seeding it out to people because like when I started, there was like me and Howitt and like Chris Bissett and like not a ton of folks doing outward horror stuff, and then McCoy, like Mothership. And so like as people started coming in and making new stuff, I made it kind of a point to befriend them and like share notes. So like when Goblin Archives released Liminal Horror, we like chatted up a whole bunch. We were just like, oh yeah, this is also super cool. Like when I met Caleb over at Haunted Table and they were doing Triangle Agency, because it was so similar to the company, I was like, oh, I gotta meet these guys. Like I gotta know what they're doing. And then we developed this working relationship, and then I got to contribute to Triangle Agency, and I was like a co-producer on it and stuff, and that was awesome. That helped me a lot, like get into a space psychologically in this kind of like scene or industry where I felt like I wasn't alone, one, and I didn't have that jealousy kind of thing that people get where you see this, like you see a product that's similar to yours and you're like, fuck, like that's gonna hurt me. But that's not true. Like we're not really competing with each other. Like those similar ideas, like I see that as somebody who I probably get along with because we have the same idea. So I've made it a point to, whenever I feel like something is similar to something I'm doing, to reach out to those people and like see if I can help them. Because I don't know, I have a lot of terrible forbidden knowledge that I don't want.
You can't just leave it sealed away.
Please, no, it dies with me. So like I gotta get it out there.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it is nice to see the number of just, I guess, games that label themselves as horror that have been coming out in the last 5 years or so. It seems like there's not like a renaissance or anything, but there's just kind of like a surge that's been happening in the last several years around the genre. I'm kind of curious, like what drew you specifically to corporate horror as you were developing the world of the company and the company Wuhan Baxter, even before you started writing the game, but just in your own kind of like, whatever, D&D campaigns, things like that. How did it kind of come about?
I mean, the idea of like horror is big now, also not just in RPGs, but like horror fiction is really huge. There's a big
for sure,
films, and I put that on the millennial experience of the last 25 years being horrific. Like the people who grew up in the last 25 years have seen the entire world shift and surge and change and be ripped out from under them. So like horror becomes a refuge. Horror becomes something that you can count on to be terrible, and you can go to that as an escape. I think that people our age have seen so much horror in their lives that they are so desensitized to it that now, like, that's what we go to as escapism. Which is the same thing in the 80s when people were coming out of the 70s and like all of that violence, the mob violence, like the hostage situations in the 70s, like all of these random bombings. Did you know there was a bombing in the United States, like 3 bombings, like on average every day in the 1970s?
I didn't know the number.
That's a lot. I knew it was more than now, but that's a lot.
Yeah, it's like bonkers. So like people were living with all of this violence, and then you have this huge boom of horror in the 80s, right? Like you have Clive Barker come out, you have all of these films, like horror comics become super huge. Swamp Thing is really big. Like all of these, this formative horror that we grew up on comes
Toxic
out
Avenger.
of that. Yeah, it comes all of the trauma stuff comes out of there. Fucking Poltergeist, Hooper, like all this stuff. So we're looking at that as kids formatively, and then living through a similar type of like traumatic experience globally, and so it makes sense that there's another boom in horror. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's the like hangover of the deindustrialization that starts in the late 60s through the 70s, but then there's the cocaine 80s, and like I think we grew up, we're all roughly the same age, more on that 80s like toy thing, and then you're kind of digging back through the crates for that culture that feels goopier and weirder and more corporeal. And I think a lot of the emphasis on the body is obscured in the 80s and 90s by the tech boom. And again, you can see how there was a rise and fall story there. And by now, we're so sick of the internet. If we grew up with whatever horrible shit on the internet, like we're desensitized, and the things we're looking to and sensitive to. I remember talking to you about home invasion and funny games. I remember talking to Adam about your game.
Right.
Vis-a-vis home invasion and these fears.
I don't remember this conversation.
I was gonna say, yeah. That are very like that are very much tied to like not to not like slasher per se, but like more real horror. Like what is really terrifying. Sure. So some of the things you're saying are like real politics is horrifying. I also think if you grew up with a lot of like represented violence, like just insane, weird internet stuff and video games, then to some degree that isn't as scary as like the thought of just like someone mugging you, right? Like something more real. And so there's sort of with video games and with I think RPGs, and it's something RPGs excel at. It's like what kind of experiences can you curate at the table? Because you're not going to have, you could go fight bad guy ghosts, but that's not scary. Like what would actually make that experience scary? It's really a question for the two of y'all, because I don't really write horror games, so I'm sort of curious how you think about it. But.
I mean, like the original question was like, why corporate horror? And I think that is, in a sense, the place where people are the most afraid.
Yeah.
Is at their jobs, because like it's a threat. Employment is a soft threat, right? Like it's like I'm gonna hold wages over you for labor, and you're probably in some sort of debt, so you need this job, and it's fear, and it keeps us all in check. When you don't have that, they look at you as if you're an outsider because they can't control you, right? So corporate horror is just this idea of being in a cage, like this idea that like other people are living your life for you because all you do is make money for them. And that people somewhere are telling you what to do, but don't care if you live or die. And so, can you tell I worked in a corporate situation?
No, it's I wouldn't have guessed it. But no, let's see. Vex in the chat is saying the threat of loss of stability is overwhelming, but also the threat of stagnancy is overwhelming. That's true. I was going to say the real threat of any employer is just your own precarity within a larger system of debt and yada.
In the U.S., we live and are raised in a system to kind of like train us to go into a workforce, right? Like we go to school and it trains us to go to like a secondary school and we learn a vocation, and then we know like during these hours of the day, that's work time, right? That's not for us. And so we start to get into that minutia and that momentum and that pattern, and then we never break out of it. And then like your job, it will grind you into dust before it recognizes there's a problem. Which sucks. Like I'm pretty sure that's not the point. Like, I don't think that was the point of life.
Well, yeah, there's that. I mean, the idea of like hobby cheese, like your thinking is narrowed by your experience, and it's recursive. It's a chicken and egg thing. And if you limit your experiences a certain way, you're going to kind of think that way and be that person after time. That you sort of stop wearing a mask, and that just becomes who you are.
Who you are.
And I think for a lot of people, for me at least, when I think about games and ask people and see them get excited, whether it's playing any particular game or another, it's like it is a time when you put on a different mask very intentionally. In the same way you might go to work with a certain attitude, you play a game with a certain attitude. And I think, horror is like an extreme case of like, let's pretend to kill each other, but it is like a way of having some ritual that's meaningful about your body and about your life, facing mortality, whatever, looking at the community and the shit decaying around us, and doing it a safe way. That is very different, from going to work and being like, everything's fine. Like, I feel this sort of all the time at work, but especially after the recent election cycle where everyone is both talking about what's happening and also like pointedly not talking about it. And so there's
talking about it at all.
Yeah. It reminds me.
Silence is just as loud.
Yeah. Like Logan, before we started taping, we were talking about museums and how they do or don't talk about like art that just went missing from 1936 to 1945 in Europe.
Specifically in Germany.
Yeah. And it's like kind of hilarious that you would go to the effort of saying like, this painting used to be here until 1936. Anyway, and just kind
of, and then it came back.
Shrug.
It was on like holiday.
Yeah.
So it's like the same at my corporate job. Is like everyone is like kind of crying level like emotion watching this like basically neo-Nazi coronate himself in the U.S. And it's like you're also not allowed to talk about it. So you're like, hey man, what's good? It's like a really weird kind of performance. I don't know. That's not really a question. Just linking it back to that idea of like how you create moments of horror in a game and like what is really horrifying. I don't know.
Isn't that the reason that the phrase "live in the dream" was invented, was to skirt around these social issues?
Sure.
Doing great. I think within the company, like with the devices and the mechanics, like I put in there, are supposed to emulate this kind of alienation, right, that you feel. And so there's mechanics to every player takes a career, right? They're employees of this company, and the career has a job, a thing you are supposed to be doing, and that directly conflicts with everybody else's job. So somebody's job is to make sure people survive, and somebody's job is to make sure that the structure survives. People can be damned, structure can be damned, either way. So the goal was not to create horror in the sense of there's a spooky thing in the corner. The goal was to create an ease at the table when everybody is working towards different goals, because that interpersonal conflict becomes stressful, and stress turns into fear real quick. So like when you give people kind of an idea that there's something bad, like let's say in a hole, and you send a bunch of people down in that hole, but each of them has a different task to do and they all conflict. The thing in the hole becomes a secondary issue. Them actually doing their job becomes conflict. And I don't know if you've played a role-playing game, but the people who play those really want some kind of conflict. So when you make it themselves, they kind of don't know what to do. And so they start fighting. And then you introduce a clock that's like, you guys also only have 30 minutes to do this. Then they start panicking. And then you introduce a monster. And they don't know what to do.
And then you assign blame. I love that. I love that you're describing the narrative structure over, the lore or whatever. It's right. It's about the narrative at the table, the ways that humans are interacting, and that you're designing for a certain kind of fear. So it's not a slasher setting, but you're starting from a certain premise and getting to a moment of kind of panic or fear.
The biggest influence, that the impetus that made me write the book was Chernobyl, the HBO miniseries. Was me watching that and just being blown away and being like, well, because that is a horror story.
Absolutely.
But there's no monster. There's no big bad that they have to fight. There's just the steady threat of imminent doom. And like they have to fix it. And so I started gamifying that. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I like the environment as monster, and even more the labor structure as a monster. And then you can always throw in a real monster, like depending on where you want to go.
You
with
throw
your
in a real
RPG.
monster,
yeah, you can always just be like, oh yeah, no, there's also like a slash or whatever, you know. It's imagination. You can do what you want. But that's great. It's such a nice premise to start from.
It's also nice to put a button on things at the end of a role-playing session. It's like, but also, yes, there is this manifestation of the fear, which maybe is related to it or not, but at least you have a thing to act upon.
I do find when you get a little bit too heady or like conceptual, people tend to like wander off. So if you have like a physical manifestation of this thing, like every monster in the company is just the company. Like it's just, because they're all okay. So you play as asset recovery and containment operatives for the Wuhan Baxter Corporation. They go into mistake situations, like they're first responders but private, right? So like there's a soldier and a scientist and an engineer and a hacker that is called a technician, and then another one, the medic. And so they go in and like they're a team. It's the Umbrella Corporation team, right, that comes into Raccoon City to fix everything. But they don't know what they're expendable. They don't know anything that's going on. They're just there to clean it up. And if they do a good job, they get paid.
Yeah. And like, I mean, like you're saying that anything they encounter is the company. I mean, I think that's the classic, really good science horror movies understand that. So there is like literally a monster in a mythological sense, that it's a creature, and it makes it appealing to little kids, and it makes it an action movie to some degree, but also the monster is like a manifestation of something, and it's getting at a bigger idea.
At the end of the day, the monster is both their antagonist and their motivation. Because it is the everything that they encounter is something that their employer created, and it's up to them to fix it in order to gain compensation from their employer. So it just completes the loop.
Yeah, and I guess like I also like the idea that maybe they have different lenses on each other and on the situation. And Vex is pointing out, you know, that's explicit in His Majesty the Worm. I think it's pretty implicit in Stillfleet and a lot of other games as well, where there's kind of, you know, you might have different factions or ideologies, and there's ways that is kind of mechanicalized. But I think that's a fun way to also get people to see that those are arbitrary and they can overcome them. Like my sheet says X, but I could also just change my mind or learn. And then there's that like same analogy for like, wait, in real life, you know, so it's like in the game, there's a monster, but in real life, the real monster is X. And there's that other analogy of like in the game, I'm choosing these bullet points to describe myself, but I could just change them. Oh, and in real life, I could also just like band together, you know, whatever. But like you said, it's actually stressful, and there are material limits, there's time limits. So yeah, I mean, it actually makes me think, Chris, we should have, and maybe in the future we can, next time you're doing a company push, we could even play some scenes or play a little game, you know?
It's not meant to be like, again, like I'm talking about like large scale philosophy, but the game is also supposed to be fucking fun, right? Like,
of course.
I don't want you to like meditate on like the cruelty of the labor cycle. I want you to enjoy yourself.
Too late.
No, but my point is, you're not gonna really meditate on it unless you enjoy yourself. Like you go through one to get to the other. You know, if you try to make a game that's just philosophy, I think you would agree, right, that you'd fail probably. Like most of those games are not actually fun to play. You know, you want to like.
I mean, like I would write a dissertation at that point.
Yeah, exactly. It's a different. Yeah, totally. So people can check out the company. I know you also have some other games, which I have. One I bought from you is a zine. One I think I bought online and read. I don't know. But you have like Psychers, Tremors, Extraction from Demon Fucked Cleveland, 1996. You have a bunch of fun like adjacent games that to me feel like of a piece, but they're all sort of specific.
I like the idea of fun adjacent.
Well, Well, I was saying adjacent to the company, but
Oh, I thought you were saying that they were adjacent to fun.
no. They're fun games that are also separate thought adjacent to the
kind of
company.
fun.
They're kind of fun. Like it's.
Yeah.
But adjacent is good. Yeah, no, Psychers is probably like it's the thing I wrote a couple years ago. We got a print last year through Space Penguin that will be on sale soon, like discount sale soon. That one, I watched the new Firestarter movie with Zac Efron. It's pretty good. And then I just got obsessed with writing a game where all you did was blow people's heads up.
I was not aware that there's a Zac Efron remake of Firestarter.
Yup, with full, and John Carpenter did the soundtrack.
Oh shit!
It's not a great movie, but it's fun.
I mean, I don't ask
Psychers,
horror movies to be great. Just ask
No,
that. Yeah,
you can't expect that.
Yeah,
It's
you
always
can't
a
expect
surprise when they're great, like Malignant.
Yeah, that's nice. It's a niceness.
What were we talking about? Psychers? Psychers, yeah, that is a power fantasy game. My friend Spencer Campbell makes power fantasy games all the time, and everybody loves them. And so I tried one. In Psychers, you are like newly awakened psychic soldiers working for an evil corporation. Stop me if you've heard this one before. And
which evil corporation?
It's Novarium Pharma, which is our pharmaceutical arm of WB. It's fine. But you play, the goal is to have access to all your powers. So the second you make your character, whether it's the pyro or the telekinetic or the telepathic, you get to do all the cool stuff immediately. The issue is the earlier you do it, the more likely you are to just blow yourself up. So it becomes this kind of balance between how do I blow up all of these corporate security guards, very cool, but also stay alive. And saying that out loud, it doesn't sound like much of a game, but it is.
No, it sounds great.
It's also
sounds like Akira adjacent, right?
Yeah,
so
it's
the lab, Stranger Things. That's sort of a tone, right?
Yeah,
and scanners and all of that good stuff.
That Cronenberg stuff. It's also secretly a company expansion because you can crazy. You can staple all those powers to your company characters, and it uses the same mechanic.
That is pretty cool. I like that a lot.
Because they have a soft spot for D10s.
Yeah, can I ask? This is kind of beside and narrative arcs and all that stuff. Why D10? What's the D10 for you?
I just really like D10s. I think it's an even it's an even number. It's 1 to 10, which is a full percentile. Like each evenly. You can break it down onto like a success and like failure chart, pretty standard. And I didn't think people would accept D12s, which are my secret favorite die.
That's our favorite. That's really the basis of.
I mean, I love D12s.
D12s are amazing, but nobody uses them for fucking anything. Like I can buy a box of D10s. If I try to ask people for a bunch of D12s, they call the police on me.
People have D12. People who play D&D own some D12s. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, but Chess isn't selling me a cube of D12s. You know what I mean?
You want to do a die pool. You want like lots of D12s just hailing from the sky.
Well, I always do pools because I hate like everything's a pool because I hate math.
I get that.
I feel like
there's no math in any of my games because
more math.
I have to do math all day for work.
It's very simple arithmetic, right? It's like, okay, I need X number of dice for this throw, and the number is right there on the sheet. Usually,
that's not math. That's just being able to count. Which is
so generally it's a D10 pool, and you're trying to get a number of successes. That's how the games are basically working.
Yeah,
like
it's D10 pools. You're just adding to your pool based off of your equipment or your skills. So if you are good in the like, okay, let's say you're trying to open a door. Oh, you're strong. That's D10. You have strength training. That's another D10. You have a crowbar. That's another D10. If somebody's helping you, that's another D10. You roll all 4. If one of those 4 falls between, it's been a minute, like 8 and 10. You great, amazing. 10 is perfect. You actually remove some stress. Everything else is like you succeed but get stress, or you fail and get more stress and burn out.
So that's okay, because I was going to ask, it sounds like you have played some of those White Wolf Apocalypse games, because I grew up, that was my thing. Like
I read them.
You play with D10s. You had a bucket of D10s. But the stress thing is different, which I think is
stressed. I just wholesale ripped off from Mothership. Why not?
Yeah, why not? It's good candor.
So yeah, I liked, like I said, it started as Mothership thing, and then I talked to Sean about it at Gen Con after playtesting it, and was just like, I'm going to take this, and this, and then we're going to do this, and this, and then push it through. So like stress and burnout is the same as in Mothership, except instead of a percentile, I use a D10 pool. It's almost the same game, if I'm being honest. Like, it's pretty close.
Yeah, but you've packaged it differently. You've written it yourself. I mean, you've taken a mechanic which can't be patented and done something different.
Oh,
cool.
I mean, like, it was always like, it's never been weird. It's always just been like, it turned into something else.
Yeah, I find it would be hard. It's like, unless it was like a what's it, the story Pierre Menard, like unless you sat down to rewrite from memory like the AD&D player's handbook or something, like it's going to be a different game every time because you're a little different and you have different opinions. And just not doing D20 means already you're like way ahead in terms of, operationalizing cool ideas.
I'm not a roll high guy. I mean, I like rolling high, but like,
I just like new stuff. So I like what you're doing. I like what you're doing there. So
and I hate my biggest problem with everything, like every game, is like when you do something and nothing happens. Like, I hate that.
Yeah.
I played a spellcaster in D&D, and when you waste a spell slot for it to miss, it's the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everything
also has no narrative content.
There's nothing. It's a waste of everyone's time.
Yeah, it just fizzles. Nothing happens. It's boring.
So there should always be a forward momentum, right? Like you fail or succeed forward. And I think with taking the crux off the numbers, the character sheet numbers, you put it on the player to tell you what is happening and not the sheet to tell you what is happening.
Yeah, I also think that's something I had to learn as like a really story focused, in screenwriting and directing classes, whatever person playing D&D, that I just assumed other GMs did, where like if you fail, something still happens. It's just not the thing you wanted.
Right.
But then having now learned that a lot, I think there is that assumption that like, okay, I didn't hit, so just sort of there's a aporia. It's like I have no idea then what could possibly happen. Even though in a real fight, like missing, you have momentum, like you're going somewhere. And even just quickly describing that can add a lot of value. So I think I in the future, I want to, in my games, have it more mechanicalized to just really support that, but at least kind of writing in like, there is no such thing as nothing happens. It's just like it's not what you wanted. Like a simple beginning of that process of trying to make every single moment, kind of, interesting.
I agree that it should be like cinematic and interesting, and everything should be like counted. But I disagree with mechanicalizing it all, because I kind of want to put some of that on the player, because I trust the player, and I don't think a lot of games do, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think a lot of games trust the people playing them.
Yeah, but mechanicalizing it could be, okay, player, now you're gonna say, like, now you do whatever, you say something, right? It doesn't have to be
no, that's fine. I just don't want there to be like oh, I've done this thing, and now I have to open this part of the document to make sure like I'm doing this crunch correctly. Right?
Oh,
like,
no.
It shouldn't be like a formula.
Yeah, but it strikes me that even mechanics like the stress mechanic that you have in the company, or that Sean uses in Mothership is a good example of like oh fuck, I just lost the word. An elegant solution to that problem, right? Where you can still have that room for narrative, but there is like at least a box that you're ticking. There's some kind of action taking.
There's a rail to follow, right? Like X equals Y equals Z. But taking away the math, taking away the sheet, like the reference to the sheet, like our company sheets are just like boxes of checks, right? There's no numbers really on them for stats. So like being able to remove player interaction with this piece of paper on the table and put it back, that interaction back into the game with the people at the table was a huge kind of breaking through point for me as a designer, because I had come from the character sheet, like the D&D, the Call of Cthulhu character sheets, where everybody's like, this is my guy. And it's not, though. That guy's up here. That's your character's data. It's not your character. Your character lives in your head. So how do we put that character and take it out of the data pool and into the game?
Yeah, and I mean, some people want some amount of data, and there's like, I think, a spectrum, but I agree that like if you tried, I've seen JRPGs that like TTRPGs, I should say, that try to do this, where like every single facet, it's like a dense 3-hour long personality test to make a character, where you're kind of doing, you know, you have a spectrum for every single aspect of your personality and like what kind of clothes you wear and everything. And it seems so unnecessary to me in terms of like storytelling.
But I mean, there's a draw for that.
Absolutely. Oh, sure. But I think that's like outside the bounds of, I think, where most players want to spend their time. But there is a spectrum, because most players, I think, are further away from probably where you and I are with like, they do, you know, I'm talking about like 5e, right? They want some level of like, oh, I see this score is really high and this score is not quite as high. And that creates some hook for them. It's affordance for them to get into maybe just the acting part that they're not as necessarily comfortable with.
Well, how else would you min-max if you can't have everything be a quantifiable number? How am I going to min my maxes?
Well, there's a bunch of different types of player, right? Like there's the player that's there to play the game and like play by the rules of the game. And then there's the player that's there to exploit the rules of the game and make the best possible character they can. And there's players that play for the story, just to play through, to find the narrative. And they're going to not necessarily make the best mechanical choices because they want that story to go in an interesting direction. You know, these are all, and then they like in hobby games and like miniature games, we also have the people who are just into the hobby cycle, right? They just want to like paint the minis or like collect the cards. They're these products. Why I'm going to get into corporate speak now. These products are not meant to like touch, like indie products are meant to touch a specific niche, like itch, right? But most games are meant to fulfill the wants of all of these types of players. And like you're supposed to find a nice balance where every one of these players comes to the table and it finds something in it. And I think that is where a lot of like independent games don't not necessarily struggle, but fall short, because they are trying to fill a very specific like niche. Like this is a game about being the friends from Friends in a coffee house. And it's like, that's great. Like there's going to be people who want that. And there's absolutely like, you banged it out, you finished it. That's an accomplishment, but it's not addressing every type of player at the table. I don't know why I brought that up.
Yeah, or like it's not addressing a large number of like it is. You can get very specific and you can simulate anything you want and it can be fun. But for a lot of people, there are like clusters of speculative kind of narrative activities. So being a Jedi, being a paladin, maybe being a mobster. I don't know. Like there's a few sort of like archetypal things that that people want to do. Weirdly, while Friends is super popular as a show, I'm not sure how many people want to pretend to be those people, because
that's just an improv group. Honestly.
Oh, yeah. That would just highlight the banality, you know, of like most of our existence. But yeah, I think it's an interesting task thinking about like where do designers fall, and when you're designing, are you trying to design for, I liked how you put it, like, are you designing for everyone? Are you designing for a relatively smaller group? And is that a conscious choice? You know, I don't know. It's something I think.
Well, I think it's something that like we should be. I read a lot of like theory on making games because it's my job. So I've been reading the fundamentals of tabletop miniature board game design recently, and they talk about these different types of players, and like what you're trying to do with a product is touch as many of them as possible, so that every group of players is different. Like you can't expect a group of players to all want the same thing because that's impossible. So you need to tailor your product to be as universal as possible. Like we talk about accessibility from like being able to read it and understand it type of viewpoint a lot of the time, but I also think we should be talking about accessibility from a like type of enjoyment, like type of engagement, like lens. Like, is this game going to satisfy storytellers and min-maxers and like everybody in between? Now it doesn't have to, but there should probably be some kind of overlap, right? Like you want to make sure that everyone enjoys themselves. At least I do. Like I want to make sure there's something for everybody, and that even the person having the least amount of fun is at least engaged.
Yeah, I think that gets to like some of these questions around storytelling, and I think it does highlight to me a persistent difference I notice as someone who's so obsessed with specifically story games and not finite games of any kind. So even Arkham Horror, y'all can say it's role playing adjacent, but to me it is not. It's clearly a finite.
It's not
game.
an end. Like there's an end goal, like an achievement, a board state that is accomplished in which you've achieved victory.
You win or lose, right? But in an infinite game, it is much more about inhabiting a persona, and that inhabitation and exploration of that with that avatar, in theory, could be equally rich whether you are like Mert Goblin Slayer 50th level, whatever, or you're Ross from Friends following around Mert, because precisely actually of the differential between you and the world and you and each other. So as long as you're not all like every single person rolled up, the main character of Severance, who's just like the most boring person on earth. Even then, it's like you're all playing a guy in a Franz Kafka story. Like it's kind of almost impossible if you like really relax and ease into your avatar, whatever you picked in a role-playing game, to not sort of have fun just like being another person. Imho, that's like my like hot take on that. Which makes it different, I think, from other kinds of games. Because I know, Logan, and we should shift a little bit because I'm curious, you do design non-story based games as well. You do both. You're like insert sports metaphor here, Bo Jackson. I don't know.
I do both. In fact, I do trad more these days.
Yeah, we spoke with Adam Voss about 1979, which I still haven't gotten my hands on, but I am looking forward to playing that very much.
It's fun. I got one over here. We can go play it.
Oh,
come over, Chris.
Hell yeah,
come over, play it.
Yeah, okay, we'll do that. Yeah, we should do that this week. But yeah, Logan, what's some other board or RPG adjacent games that you're working on at the moment?
So I used to work for Sideline Habitus. I did like Joking Hazard and Sausage and Hot Dog and Texas Hold'em. Worked on those. Right now I'm working on a card game called Rec League. That's about mechs, building mechs and fighting them. Been working on it for a couple of years, just as an exercise, but like it won't go away, so that's fun. I had an idea for a skirmish miniature game last week that I want to not do.
And yet you will.
Yeah, probably. And then I think I finally cracked found footage as like a game, like a way to do it, but I don't really want to talk about it right now.
That's fine. We don't have to talk about it right now.
It's like I just it's still in cooking. But found footage has been this thing that I've been kind of like trying to nail down for a really long time to like get the idea, because found footage is my end all be all favorite. And I really want the feeling of being, because like there's this whole philosophy behind like found footage horror and how like you're looking in on something that was not supposed to be there, so it's got a very like classical painting type feel to it, where like it's this secret like fourth wall that wasn't meant for you, so there's this kind of voyeuristic aspect to it that people kind of find enticing, and then like couple that with horror and it kind of catches you off guard, and it's my favorite. I just think it's up there with like Giallo, right? Like this revolutionary way to tell a story through tension and horror that hadn't been seen before. And And so I've been trying to figure out how to do that as a game. I think I figured it out, but like I gotta tinker with it. But it's journaling mostly.
Okay, nice. Let it cook.
Cool.
I love that.
Yeah, I got to bring in another dimension, which we didn't really queue up beforehand, but I feel like, Logan, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a big cinephile, right? Like, you know a lot about movies, real into movies, which
I went
must
to
inform...
film school, yeah.
Yeah. So that must I was going to ask, because like I in theory went to school to be a screenwriter. I am not a professional screenwriter, but I think that has informed all of the writing I've done, because it taught me to write a certain way by doing it over and over again a certain way. And so now like I approach writing by thinking about like, okay, who's there? What can I see? What can I hear? You know, like, and I wonder, you know, how that sort of depth of knowledge about film history has worked into your game experience. So two different threads there, but one is like games that aren't RPGs, and another is like movies and games ?
Yeah, I mean, I write very cinematically. The last few things I published have been like written and directed by me. Like that's what I put on the title. Because I started thinking of games as less like narratives and more like toys. So adventures are like play sets. Games are like systems are like action figures, and like you're attaching things to them. So when I start to think of them like that, like I can kind of play with them a little bit more in my head. I started using non-linear writing software too, like Scrivener and stuff. So like I can kind of like pick and choose what I work on, and then put it together as a full narrative. But yeah, like that's the same as like non-linear film editing, or like, you know, shooting out a sequence. Learning about cinema has both like enhanced my appreciation of cinema, because it's amazing and like I love movies. It's also completely ruined watching anything ever. And my partner Katie works in advertising and marketing, and so like between the two of us, we're just like, wow, how much did this cost? Where this is where the key light is, like, oh, here's how they did this. I mean, it's fucking awful. So I can't recommend it, but it is kind of fun to like know how people did stuff, and like it takes that kind of like mystique away from it a little bit.
But there's also like this was my experience when I was in undergrad. I was a photography and digital media major, and I had a lot of similar experiences where I would go to a photography show, and I would be looking at like the grain of the film that they were using and trying to be like, oh, which film is this? Like, what paper was this printed on? And I would say it does take away from like a kind of purely sense experience of it in a way, but it does, like, there's still joy in that, picking it apart and seeing how it's made and
there
finding
is.
it.
I
think that's worth it.
Find to develop a way to turn it off after a while. Like,
for sure.
After doing it for a little bit, you kind of, because I go to like repertory screenings all the time, like 35. Like I went to go see Blood and Black Lace on 35 a couple weeks ago, and I was just like, oh, I've seen this movie like 30 times, right? But I've never seen it on film, and I've never seen it with a full audience. So it was like an entirely new experience. Like I went to go see The Shining on 35, and I had never seen it on film before, and I
I've never seen
realized how loud the music is in the movie, because I've only ever seen a digital mix. So like I was watching it on film, and like the dialogue will be very quiet, and that'll be very, very like serene. And then that score comes in and it just pounds the entire place. So it becomes like a psychological mind fuck. And like, that was a completely different experience. The Shining is one of my favorite movies. Like I've seen it so many times, but I've never seen it like that. And it changed how I understood it. And so like, there's an appreciation, but also this like discovery too.
Did we lose Wythe?
I think Wythe died.
No, I've been, y'all froze for me a while ago, but then it seemed like it cut back in at one point and y'all were still talking. So I was like, oh, I don't want to interrupt then if it's working. Y'all talk. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
New York City, not good with the Wi-Fi.
Choose between heat or Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it just alternates.
That actually sounds like the premise for a horror short story on a right now. It's just like, yeah, God. Although I'm reading The Water Knife by Paolo Bacigalupi right now.
Bacigalupi, yeah.
And I gotta say that book is the scariest horror book that I've read in a long time. Literally just about not having water in the desert. Around Las Vegas, water war kind of stuff going on, but it's terrifying and it works at horror.
Well, it's a nice marriage of a
so
kind of
close.
like the cyberpunk biopunk corporate dystopia with cli-fi. Like he
Yeah.
always focuses a lot on the climate, and in that book, unlike the threat of the sea in Wind Up Girl, in Water
Right.
Knife, and in Shipbreaker, it's the sea, right? The uncanny sea, as Ethan would say. That's always like just behind you, ready to destroy everything. In Water Knife, it's the opposite, right? It's the idea of desertification and kind of like no matter what you do, you know, you're fucked for the opposite reason, that just things are drying up and there's just not enough to go around. And even if you're like part of that elite that controls the water, it's still not actually that great. It's his works. I don't remember. I haven't read it since it came out, but like don't seem to go as far as like, so what? Like it's not the solar punkin version of like, therefore we should do X. But I do think to your point about showing the problem, it's like, yeah, these are, and we're Logan here. I think he would say maybe something about J.G. Ballard. But there's a fine tradition of sort of dystopian future America that Becky Gloopy participates in. Logan is taking a quick break for those of you on the stream. And so, Chris, if you want to just, chat for a second until Logan returns and we resume the podcast. Maybe this will just be cut out of the podcast, right? I assume.
This will definitely be cut out of the podcast, yeah. Or maybe not. Who knows?
I think it probably should. At least like my Wi-Fi cutting out and Logan taking a quick break. We can keep us talking about books if you want.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, just for, the couple folks who are watching right now, Vex and Generic Brunette, we are going to be on the Left of Cinema podcast. I think we're recording in late April. Is that right, Wythe?
I think so. We should also, we'll tell Logan. I don't know if Logan listens
or
to
left of the
podcast.
Projector. I keep getting that wrong. Yeah, Left of the Projector. So if you want to hear us rant about the movie Gattaca and biopunk and near gooey futures, that's what we're going to be doing in April.
Storytelling and bodies, and generally in science. I'm looking forward to that.
Self. Yeah, it'll be fun.
It's
Left of the Projector.
My writing has always danced around whether at work, at money work, or at game work. It's always been about goopy medicine and goopy food. So Gattaca is kind of one of the pet movies.
I came back. Sorry,
how's it going,
my dog. I stopped to pet the dog.
Took a break for a dog. No, that's fine. We love animals.
Dude, great.
Dude,
my dog's name is Dolly Burton. She's the best.
Such a good name.
I love that. But I had two. They don't live with me anymore. They're off. I literally lost these dogs in our divorce. But we had two hound dogs. One was named Towns, and the other was Emmy Lou, after Towns Van Zandt and Emmy Lou Harris. And I gotta say, country singer names for dogs, always a good call.
Yeah, they're not gonna let you down.
No.
Yeah,
not those ones.
Not those ones. You have to be very careful. We had to get rid of my dog Toby Keith.
Well, now we only have cats, but it makes me want a dog named Shabuzi, just to the hip hop influence.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
A dog named Ernest Tubb.
Ooh, Ernest Tubb. Tubb would be great.
Tubb's good.
Pretty good.
Yeah,
Tubb's good.
Ernest is my grandfather's name, so that would work.
There you go.
Buck Owens would be a good dog name.
Yeah, Buck Owens would be great.
Chris Christopherson is a good marmoset name.
Hank Williams the Third. Yeah.
Hank Williams the Fourth.
So where were we?
Talking about dog names. My bad.
No, you're good. Logan, can you tell us a little about designing or working on with big teams? Right, because it's not all you designing all these things, but you're at Cyanide and Happiness. You've worked on a ton of Kickstarters. What is the general industry like? I know that's a broad question, but if someone was listening and was like, "Oh, this person's made a lot of games," how would you sort of break down or think about like making other kinds of games? Like we sort of started with indie RPGs because that's what we mostly do, but that's like a tiny percentage, right? Most games are not that.
Most games are not that. Most games are gambling. If I'm going to be completely honest, most games are gambling.
Yeah, that's why I love Magic.
No, I mean like gaming in general as part of an industry, the biggest chunk of it is gambling. People who design board games design casino games and like slot machines. The other one is war games. Like a bunch of game designers go off and design games for the CIA. That's a big part of the industry too. Commercially, RPGs are a small part of it. Big ones are like, Hasbro, Asmodee. Making stuff, it's incredibly rewarding. I love what I do. Working in the traditional game industry and the indie RPG industry lets me kind of like, they're the same industry, just secret spoiler alert, it's all the same. It's small. It's like a small town. Like everybody kind of knows each other. Like we're all like I met Wythe through Taylor Moore, because Taylor Moore and I were friends, and like then we Wythe, I've been working with you for the last year, like to make Stillfleet more financially viable and make us, grow as a company.
Yep.
But like I think it's kind of antithetical to that indie mindset though, because you have to start thinking like a company or a corporation. And most of the time when you're getting into something like this, it's not, I hope it's not to make money, because bad news. But also like you get into making indie stuff because you feel a drive to do it, right? Like you feel like nobody else has made this thing, or like you're the only one that can say this, or like that you have this really great idea that you have to get on paper. It's never because you're like, this is going to make me rich. And that is the key difference between indie mentality and corporate mentality. Because corporate mentality is, oh, I can make money off of this. And that's not a bad thing to think. Like, we need money to survive. It isn't necessarily evil while living in capitalism. But, like, you don't have to be stupid about it. Like, you don't have to be, like, flying without a plan. And I think that that's intimidating for indie people, because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of unknown and it's a lot of planning. And when you're creative, you just want to get it out. You just want to get it done and you want to get it out. And you want as many people to see it as possible. So planning and creativity, sometimes antithetical. Don't know where I'm going with this, but those are two disparate parts that I try to, mix up. I come from both worlds, so I try to kind of bridge that gap with people. Like I've done it with you, Wythe, just trying to like get you into mass manufacturing in China and like getting things for cheaper so that we make actual product margins. And those are scary things to think about because it starts to become a job. And it starts to become a product. And these are like 4-letter words to like indie artists, right? Like you don't want to sell out, but you're not selling out, you're surviving. And like, if you can make things sustainably to make new things, then I don't see how that's a negative.
It's also like a mindset shift because I think a lot of us, I'm not really, I'm speaking for myself, but I feel like I see people out there who are like me, who are like, I like to think well-meaning Marxists of a certain age who grew up well off enough where I'm reading books about stuff, but I'm mostly working a normal job because that's just what one does. It's like the Fight Club thing of like, well, my dad said get a job, so I got a job. And then you're thinking, man, what I really believe is X, what I'm doing is Y. There's like this big cognitive dissonance, and it makes it seem intimidating to like have a small company or ever make money doing anything close to what you really care about, your art, because that would be bad, right? What I really should do is somehow live in a communist utopia. And it's like, okay, go do, as you get older, you're like, okay, go do that. Sure. Like have fun. And I just think it's like in real life, the world is so complex and big and it moves to some degree so slowly, even when stuff is changing. It's like, yeah, it's hard. And also if you already have spent all that time sort of philosophically interrogating who you are and what the society is in which you find yourself, like you're not going to run a company where, right, you're actually bad at it. Probably you're not going to make a lot of money. You're not going to sell out necessarily. I mean, it's like possible that, you have a different approach, just kind of genetically. And I think that's probably where a lot of indie creators are struggling is they're so worried about doing it the right way and ethically, which is good. environmentally, sustainably, etc. But that they don't have any business training. Like we, with our company, we just started doing Kickstarters, and that's like, as Logan, I think that was one of the first things he said to us was like, that's not really a business model, right? Like that's a way to pay yourself back for making a cool thing, which is fun, but it's not a business. And so having that mindset shift of like, all right, how do you make games literally for a living where it just pays for your rent? Even, you're not rich, but it's paying for rent.
Sure.
It's a different mindset,
And it's hard to shift from an indie mindset or an artist mindset or like I went to art school. I'm an artist. I'm a creative. Like I want to make things. The necessary evil is having to do admin because I have to, and I have that skill set. So I want to give it to other people so they don't have to go through like beating their head against a wall to get it. Right? That knowledge was hard won. I should pass it on. In society, we don't value the arts at all now. We don't champion people to go out and be painters and poets and sculptors. We don't do that anymore. Barely let people be filmmakers. That's a shame. We don't let artists daydream. Like David Lynch always said, like, if you want to make art, you have to be able to not make art. You have to be able to sit and just be with your thoughts and have ideas arrive. We don't let people do that. Creatives have to be not just creatives. They have to be marketing professionals and social media experts and accountants and graphic designers and like the customer service reps. Like that's not fair. Like, how are you supposed to concentrate on being creative when you have to do 10 other jobs? It's a harsh environment for creatives. It's a harsh environment for anyone trying to be themselves, honestly. I don't know. There was no like uplifting message there.
I was just reflecting. I mean, Wythe and I have talked about this book before. I think on the podcast, but The Agony of Eros by Byung-Chul Han. What you're saying is just bringing me back to that. He has this concept that he calls the inferno of sameness, which is where like difference is slowly eroded over time under capitalism. And things are loud and fast and happening all the time, but it's also monotonous in the same breath.
It's kind of like David Graeber, like is talking about how like we've lost touch of what we actually owe each other, which is like compassion and respect and empathy, and all we think about is money. Yeah, and how money is everything.
Well, and it's that connection between the individual and the social, the cultural, I should say, at the level of that constraint of thought and possibility. Where if everyone is an entrepreneur working on their brand, then not only to Chris's point, it's kind of a cacophony. So every single interaction I have with every friend is like, support my brand for $5 or something. And it's like, on the one hand, oh, I like that person, and maybe they're good at their thing, let's say, but also like, damn, I just wanted to like talk. Like I thought, how's your mom's? Like, how's your girlfriend? Like, I don't know. And on the other hand, it does just become, I think, tiring, and it creates a sort of mentality where like that is just how you think. You kind of wake up and you're like, I got to beat my brand today. And I feel like as an indie creator, we struggle with that too. Like
it's a Renaissance festival. Like it's just the Renaissance festival, right? Like you have a bunch of people that are really good at one thing and they hang out in one place and they're like, I'm the smithy guy, I'm the nut guy. But like on a bigger scale, it's just a fucking Renaissance festival. like those people go and they do that and then they go to their normal jobs. But now it's just like 24/7 Renaissance festival. Like you got to sell the nuts, you sell the pickles, you swallow the swords. That's what you do. Also advertise.
Yeah. And also I really like the metaphor of the Renaissance Festival because it also calls to mind that idea of being other, pretending, which I invoked earlier as this like really positive thing about story games. But it's true that in another sense, when we are our brand all day as independent artist, creator, whatever, designers, we're also performing.
Alternatively, representative of the brand we work for.
Or we've identified with some power. We've paid fealty to the Baron of games somewhere or another.
And half your day you're not yourself. You're a representative of the person that's paying you.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, I mean, I always compare advertising to Severance. Like when I do advertising, I am in that.
It's
show.
yeah, it's
I
a
don't
different
care.
brain. Like when I have to do marketing shit, I'm the same way. I'm like, all I care about is the KPI.
Yeah, because it's just too. It's like it's almost confusing to try to. I find especially the older I get, like I have no patience to merge the two or like pretend that I'm gonna have all these satisfying relationships.
I'm sure it's not going to be
one
psychologically detrimental to us later in life.
No, surely not.
No way.
There's no way.
That's what drugs are for.
Definitely not some kind of Jekyll and Hyde situation.
and that gets it. And again, Aldous Huxley predicted it, right? And then so people just go home and take Soma, right? They don't want to participate. There is no political sphere because there's no earnest exchange. There's no sincerity. There's
how'd that work out?
Worked out great, right? Is everyone's happy in the end of?
Yeah, I feel great.
Everything's going great.
Everything's great. So
what were we saying about Dr. Phil in my fucking town, fucking televising ice raids, man?
Oh yeah, Jesus. So we live in Extraction from Demon Fucked Cleveland, 1996. I think was really the end of.
That's what it all comes back to.
The end of my hypothesis.
I mean, I'm in Chicago. I don't know if I mentioned that, which is not New York.
It's not.
No,
it's a different place.
I thought everywhere was New York.
Yeah, I bet you did.
So yeah, I don't know where we left off with that. I think I think one of the things you're pointing to with the industry is if you want to make games, you probably doesn't make sense for the vast majority of people to think they can just do it on their own as indie artists without any sense of a business plan.
There's sorry, I got way off track.
No, we're going there
indie stuff, like for industry stuff, there's a bunch of different roads to publication. If you have a really good idea and you want to develop it into a game, there are a bunch of different ways to make that happen, right? Like you can sell it to a publisher for like pennies on the dollar and like get an advance, and like they'll publish the game and like take it from you, and then you'll just get a royalty. Or you can publish it yourself, like through Kickstarter, like most people do, like in our industry, like in our neck of the woods. Or on the other hand, like there's just like this slow idea of a community game that just gets built out, like chess. Like chess is just a game that we've just been passing around for a few centuries, right? Like it's not like somebody has a credit on it.
Yeah.
Although that's a good idea now that I think about it. I invented chess.
You heard it here first.
That's spoiler. That was the big reveal. That Logan on our podcast.
Logan Dean chess.
Logan Dean is actually a time traveler who invented chess.
I don't know why somebody hasn't put their name on that yet.
You'd be a fool not to. I mean, just think of the royalties.
Damn, brutal. Hated that.
Yeah.
Fuck, it was right there. That was real low-hanging fruit.
Well, let's see. I want to be mindful of time. We're coming up on an hour.
I don't even know what's happening anymore.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a fugue state, frankly, but I think it's been that way for about a week now.
I make games.
Yeah.
We make games. Chris, did you have? I have one other sort of wrap-up question before we wrap up.
That makes sense.
No, go for it. Okay. Do your wrap-up question, and then we'll wrap up.
Mechs are great. We all love mechs.
Evergreen. Everybody loves mechs.
Love mechs. Love mechs.
I guess two questions. Why do you think mechs are so great? And also, Logan, do you want to tease a little about the mech game you're working on? Is that something you would like to talk about?
Sure. Why do I think mechs are great? Because I think power fantasy is great. Like I think the idea is
correct.
It's twofold.
That's it.
Power fantasy is great, and everybody longs to be back in the womb.
I like that.
Deep.
It's a very Evangelion approach.
Yeah, so it's like I'm in the egg and I'm beating everything up.
Yeah. I'm in the egg, but I have the power of a god simultaneously.
Yeah, mechs are fucking dope.
Mechs are fucking dope.
The only other thing that's cooler is like kaiju, because Godzilla rules.
Mechs fight kaiju though, right?
I know. Well, it's a natural. They come peanut together butter, like eggs chocolate. And peanut butter. Yeah. Eggs are so expensive. That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I just want everybody to know they're really expensive. If you're watching this outside the United States, the eggs are so. Please help us. it's like 28 days later, just like, please help us.
It's so close to 28 days later. It really is.
Please, sir.
We're renaming all the bodies of water just America. It's going to be like the America Ocean on one side and the other America Ocean on the other side. It's just going to be confusing, actually.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'll be like Hudson Bay. It'll just swallow us whole.
I can't wait to visit North
Rec
Montana.
League is a game I've been working on for a couple of years now. The main idea comes from wanting. I play a lot of Magic, as we've discussed. I love Magic. I'm kind of stuck in that loop because of a blood pact I made when I was like 12.
Yep.
I want to be able to play a Magic the Gathering Commander, like EDH type experience with people who aren't into Magic, and without that buy-in. And I think one of the best games in the last few years to do something like that is Radlands by Roxley. It's a 2-player game about like raiding each other's raider camps in a post-apocalyptic waterless future, made by some ex-Magic pros. But the idea is that it's a full collectible card game in one box that will never be more than one box, which is really cool. And like you get that experience without having to, engage with this inherently predatory like apparatus. Now I love Magic, and like I'll never be free of that monkey on my back. But I did want to create a commander type experience that was similar to that floor player feel, that wasn't requiring hours of curating 100 card deck. So the main deck building mechanic in Rec League is there is a frame, which is your main character, like your mech, and then you get a corporate sponsor that becomes like your power base. So the sponsor and the mech are your commander per se. And then you choose 6 systems to kind of synergize with those powers that you've chosen. And each one of those systems has 5 cards. So you create, by choosing 6 things, you've created a 30-card deck. And then you just beat each other up. But the game is, it's meant to be played very fast. It's meant to find really interesting combos. And it's meant to be played again really quickly. So the thing we were running into in playtesting, especially over last year, was the game was just going so fast. Like we were going like 10, 15-minute rounds. And the more players you add, the faster it gets, which is very strange. And I thought this was a bad thing, but all the playtest groups really liked it. And I had removed the deck building from it because that was taking too long in demos. So what I realized was, they are enjoying it because then they can just go and make a new mech and then play it again. They just can keep looping. And that kind of broke it open for me, where I was like, okay, so it's not bad that somebody's getting knocked out in the second round and their friends are taking 5 more minutes to play, and then they're all playing again. If you play Commander and you get knocked out in the 3rd or 4th round, you're sitting there for an hour and a half.
It's agony. It's absolute agony.
Waiting for like somebody's 300 squirrel tokens to finally eat and
waiting for the combo player to finish their turn.
Yeah, and while I have a very deep, unabiding love for like that type of Magic play, it sucks. Like,
yeah, it's not fun to be put in that position. It's really shitty.
Person, you don't want that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do that emulation. I also stole a ton of stuff from Netrunner because it's my all-time favorite card game. And it's not technically in print anymore, so none of that's nailed down. Yep. There's a good chunk of Hearthstone in there now too, because like I had some long hard conversations with myself about, without a better term, mana ramp and how that worked. So we'll see what happens with it. I like it.
It sounds super fun. It sounds really great.
Future Sport, like my biggest influence on it is like the Wipeout games for PlayStation.
Nice.
Fuck yeah. No, and I want to play it for one. I'm gonna play test it and see where it goes. So Logan, maybe at least we can figure out a way to do that at a con or something, and maybe have you back on when you drop the
I'm at like Gamma next month, and then Origins on Pub, Gen Con, PAX.
Sick. We're at most of those. Not Gamma, unfortunately, but
yeah, we won't be at Gamma.
But... Vex also wants to play test. One day we will play with Vex in person, maybe, or most likely on the internets. That's all. So those are the questions I had. So thank you, Logan, for talking about Rec League. I'm excited about it. Chris, do you have any other questions for Logan Dean?
Only my favorite final question, which is, Logan, where can folks find you? Where can they find your work? How can we best support you?
So I do all sorts of stuff. My main website is logandean.games.
That's great flex. .games. LoganDean.games.
It was cheap. And then all of the Megacorp stuff is mega-corp.itch.io. We love itch. You can buy the company on DriveThruRPG, but it's free on itch. So go for it. If you want a copy of Psychers, Space Penguin has these cool like blue like medical like blue book editions of Psychers available still. I think we got like 50 or 60 of them left. They're really pretty, and they come with character cards.
Ooh, very nice.
I think at the company we're going to do another company run soon. I reformatted the whole book to be spiral bound.
Nice.
Because I made all of these. Which side? Fucking these guys. I made all these by hand. I made about 700 of these by hand. That was the last 2 editions of the company. Not doing that anymore. My hands, better stuff to do. So we're going to spiral bound those fuckers. Maybe put them in a box.
Oh.
And then my one stretch goal will be cool lanyards.
Love a lanyard.
Love a good lanyard.
That's fun.
And I really want, if I can make a good chunk of money on that Kickstarter, I'm going to buy an ID card printer, and then just go to cons and like print people ID cards.
That sounds great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They're like $600. It's kind of pricey.
That's insane.
Really? Oh, for like a corporate ID, like it's a plastic. It's like heavy.
Oh yeah,
not like paper. Yeah,
we take a picture and we crank out an ID, and then if you buy a book, we'll give it to you.
I mean, that is cool. You could also do a nice like thermal paper, like paper version if you want.
It's not as cool.
No, it's not as cool, but all right, Logan, we'll leave you to figure out your ID printing. But everyone we've had on Logan Dean, who's super smart and good at things and makes a bunch of games, and you can check him out at logandean.games.
Hire me.
Yeah,
well, we got you. We need more money.
No, I'm not talking
us.
to you. I'm talking to the
Oh, sorry, I'm done. That's right.
I already worked for you.
We're done.
Logan already works with us, man.
I already work here.
Thanks to everybody listening to the show. This has been Why We Roll. I'm gonna hit end stream.
Roll out.
Roll out. Roll out.
I already work for you.